In 1889, in the small Austrian town of Braunau am Inn, a boy named Adolf Hitler was born to Elwa Hitler, a customs official, and Clara Hitler. His childhood was marked by conflict with his authoritarian father, who wanted him to become a civil servant, while young Adolf dreamed of becoming an artist. After his father's death in 1903 and his mother's death from cancer in 1907, Hitler moved to Vienna to pursue art. He applied twice to the Academy of Fine Arts and was rejected both times. For the next several years, he lived in poverty, selling postcards and paintings on the street, sleeping in homeless shelters, and absorbing the anti-Semitic and nationalist ideas that circulated in Vienna's political pamphlets and newspapers at the time. In 1913, Hitler moved to Munich, Germany, partly to avoid conscription into the Austro-Hungarian army, which he despised. When the First World War broke out in 1914, he enthusiastically volunteered for the German army instead. He served as a message runner on the Western Front, was wounded twice, and was awarded the Iron Cross, First Class, a decoration rarely given to a soldier of his low rank. In October 1918, weeks before the war ended, he was temporarily blinded in a mustard gas attack. While recovering in a military hospital, he learned that Germany had surrendered. He later wrote that this news devastated him more than his physical injuries, and he became convinced that Germany's army had not been defeated on the battlefield, but had been betrayed from within by politicians, socialists, and Jews. This belief, later known as the stab-in-the-back myth, became the foundation of his entire political worldview. After the war, Germany was in chaos. The Treaty of Versailles forced Germany to accept blame for the war, pay massive reparations, and lose territory. Unemployment was high, and the new Weimar Republic was fragile and widely resented. In 1919, while working for the army as an intelligence agent monitoring political groups, Hitler was sent to observe a small nationalist party called the German Workers' Party. Instead of simply observing, he joined it. Within a year, due to his talent for public speaking, he became its leader and renamed it the National Socialist German Workers' Party, abbreviated as the Nazi Party. He designed the party's swastika flag and built a paramilitary wing called the Sturmabteilung, or SA, made up largely of demobilized soldiers and street fighters. In November 1923, Hitler attempted to seize power by force in what became known as the Beer Hall Putsch. He and his followers stormed a beer hall in Munich where local government officials were speaking, declared a national revolution, and marched through the streets the next day intending to take over the Bavarian government. Police opened fire, killing 16 Nazi supporters and 4 police officers. Hitler was arrested and charged with treason. At his trial, rather than expressing remorse, he used the courtroom as a stage to promote his ideology, gaining national media attention. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but served less than 9 months. During this time, he dictated his book, Mein Kampf, which laid out his plans for German expansion. His hatred of Jews, communists, and other groups he blamed for Germany's problems, and his vision of a racially organized state. After his release, Hitler rebuilt the Nazi Party, deciding that the path to power would be through legal elections rather than armed revolution. Throughout the late 1920s, the party remained a minor political force. Everything changed with the Great Depression, which hit Germany especially hard starting in 1929. Banks collapsed, unemployment soared past 6 million people, and the existing government proved unable to respond effectively. Hitler capitalized on public anger and fear, promising to restore German pride, create jobs, and reverse the Treaty of Versailles. The Nazi Party's share of the vote rose dramatically, from under 3% in 1928 to over 18% in 1930, and then to 37% in July 1932, making it the largest party in the German parliament, the Reichstag. Behind closed doors, a group of conservative politicians and industrialists believed they could use Hitler for their own purposes and then control him. On January 30, 1933, President Paul von Hindenburg appointed Hitler as Chancellor of Germany. Hitler moved quickly to consolidate power. Less than a month later, on February 27, 1933, the Reichstag building burned down in an act of arson. The Nazis blamed communists for the fire, and used it to convince Hindenburg to sign the Reichstag fire decree, which suspended civil liberties and allowed for the arrest of political opponents without trial. In March 1933, the Reichstag passed the Enabling Act, which gave Hitler's cabinet the power to enact laws without parliamentary approval, effectively ending democracy in Germany. Over the following months, Hitler banned all political parties except the Nazi Party, purged the civil service of Jews and political opponents, and established the Gestapo, a secret police force. In June 1934, in an event known as the Night of the Long Knives, Hitler ordered the murder of Ernst Rechem, the leader of the SA, along with dozens of other perceived rivals within his own movement. To eliminate any threat to his authority, and to reassure the German army that the SA would not replace it. When President Hindenburg died in August 1934, Hitler merged the offices of Chancellor and President, declaring himself Führer, the supreme leader of Germany, with total control over the government, the military, and the courts. Throughout the mid-1930s, Hitler's government enacted increasingly severe laws targeting Jewish citizens. The Nuremberg Laws of 1935 stripped Jews of German citizenship and forbade marriage or sexual relations between Jews and non-Jewish Germans. Jewish people were gradually excluded from professions, schools, and public life. On the night of November 9, 1938, in an event known as Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass, Nazi paramilitaries and civilians attacked Jewish businesses, synagogues, and homes across Germany and Austria, killing dozens of people, injuring many more, and sending 30,000 Jewish men to concentration camps. This marked a clear escalation from legal discrimination toward organized violence. At the same time, Hitler rebuilt the German military in direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles, reintroducing conscription and rapidly expanding the army, navy, and air force. He remilitarized the Rhineland in 1936, annexed Austria in the Anschluss of March 1938, and, following the Munich Agreement in which Britain and France attempted to appease him, annexed the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia later that year. In March 1939, he broke that agreement entirely and occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia. On September 1, 1939, German forces invaded Poland, using a new strategy known as Blitzkrieg or Lightning War, combining fast-moving tanks, motorized infantry, and air power to overwhelm defenses. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany, and the Second World War began. Over the next 2 years, Germany's military achieved a series of stunning victories. In 1940, German forces conquered Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and, most significantly, France, which fell in just 6 weeks, a defeat that shocked the world given France's large army and fortifications. Britain, under Prime Minister Winston Churchill, refused to surrender or negotiate, and endured sustained German bombing during the Battle of Britain, in which the Royal Air Force ultimately prevented a German invasion by denying Germany control of the skies. In 1941, Hitler's forces, along with Italy, invaded the Balkans and North Africa, and Hitler formed alliances with Italy and Japan, creating the Axis powers. On June 22, 1941, Hitler made a decision that would prove disastrous. He launched Operation Barbarossa, a massive invasion of the Soviet Union, breaking a non-aggression pact the two countries had signed in 1939. Initially, German forces advanced rapidly, capturing huge amounts of territory and inflicting massive casualties on Soviet forces. However, the invasion was delayed by fighting in the Balkans, and German forces were caught by the brutal Russian winter without adequate cold weather equipment. The advance stalled outside Moscow in December 1941. That same month, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, and Hitler, honoring his alliance with Japan, declared war on the United States, drawing America fully into the conflict on 2 fronts. As the war expanded, the Nazi regime moved toward implementing what it called the final solution, a plan for the systematic murder of European Jews. This had been preceded by mass shootings of Jews, Roma, communists, and others carried out by mobile killing units called Einsatzgruppen following the invasion of the Soviet Union. In January 1942, Senior Nazi officials met at the Wannsee Conference near Berlin to coordinate the logistics of mass deportation and murder across occupied Europe. Over the following 3 years, the regime constructed and operated extermination camps, most notoriously Auschwitz-Birkenau, where victims were transported by rail from across Europe and murdered, primarily in gas chambers. By the end of the war, 6 million Jewish men, women, and children had been murdered, along with millions of others including Roma people, disabled individuals, Soviet prisoners of war, political dissidents, and gay men, in what is now known as the Holocaust. The turning point of the war came in 1942 and 1943. At the Battle of Stalingrad, German forces became trapped in brutal urban combat and were ultimately surrounded and forced to surrender in February 1943, at a cost of hundreds of thousands of German casualties. This defeat shattered the myth of German military invincibility and marked the beginning of a sustained Soviet counteroffensive that would push German forces back across Eastern Europe over the following 2 years. In North Africa, German and Italian forces were defeated by British and American troops by mid-1943. In July 1943, the Allies invaded Sicily, and Italy soon surrendered, though German forces continued fighting in Italy. On June 6, 1944, known as D-Day, Allied forces launched a massive invasion of Normandy, France, opening a new front in Western Europe. Combined with the ongoing Soviet advance from the east, Germany was now being crushed between two enormous fronts. On July 20, 1944, a group of German military officers attempted to assassinate Hitler by planting a bomb in a briefing room at his headquarters. Hitler survived with only minor injuries because the bomb had been moved slightly behind a heavy table leg before it detonated. In the aftermath, he ordered brutal reprisals, and thousands of people suspected of involvement in the plot or of general disloyalty were executed. By early 1945, Germany's military situation was collapsing on all sides. Soviet forces advanced from the east, and American, British, and French forces advanced from the west. Hitler retreated to an underground bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, from which he continued to issue orders for a defense that was increasingly detached from reality, moving divisions on maps that no longer existed. In April 1945, Soviet forces reached Berlin and began the final battle for the city amid heavy shelling and street-to-street fighting. On April 29, 1945, in the bunker, Hitler married his longtime companion Eva Braun. He also dictated his final political testament, in which he expelled several senior Nazi officials from the party and, remaining unrepentant to the end, continued to blame Jewish people for the war. On April 30, 1945, with Soviet troops just blocks away from the Chancellery, Hitler and Eva Braun died by suicide in a private study within the bunker. Hitler shot himself while also biting into a cyanide capsule. Their bodies were carried outside by aides, doused in gasoline, and burned per instructions Hitler had given to prevent his body from being displayed by Soviet forces. Berlin surrendered to Soviet forces on May 2, 1945. Germany formally surrendered unconditionally on May 8, 1945, ending the war in Europe. The war Hitler started resulted in the deaths of an estimated 70 to 85 million people worldwide, when accounting for all theaters of the Second World War, making it the deadliest conflict in human history. Germany itself was left divided, occupied, and in ruins, split between the Allied powers, and later becoming the front line of the Cold War for the next 4.5 decades. Surviving senior Nazi officials were tried for war crimes and crimes against humanity at the Nuremberg trials, beginning in late 1945, establishing legal precedents that still underpin international law regarding genocide and crimes against humanity today. The concentration and extermination camps were liberated by Allied forces in 1944 and 1945, revealing the full scale of the Holocaust to a shocked world, and the survivors' testimonies became a permanent record intended to ensure such events would never be repeated. Now tell me which story I want to do next, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.